Hello again, YouTube world. Gordy Canuck coming to you, as always, from my little small town of Brighton, Ontario, southeastern Ontario. Before I get going, I often forget to mention this. If you like a video, you're welcome to like, you're welcome to subscribe, and you're welcome to share, obviously. If I wanted to keep my opinions to myself, I wouldn't put out a YouTube video. Wanted to talk tonight about what's happening with the situation between the West, broadly speaking, and Russia. Not about Russia and Ukraine so much, but about Russia's recent proclamation that Putin is saying that going forward, I believe it's starting this Friday. I've linked an article below from CBC. Starting this Friday, they're going to be requiring or mandating that countries are buying natural gas from Russia that they pay in rubles as opposed to US dollars. And this is significant, but there's some background, and I'd love to hear some comments. If anyone disagrees, agrees, if you don't think I have a firm grasp on it, I think a fairly decent grasp. The US dollar is sometimes referred to as the petrodollar, and that's because almost all the world's natural gas, oil, most commodities in point of fact, but oil in particular, are traded in US dollars. And so what that means is that purchasers of oil have to keep large quantities, a large sum of US dollars in their accounts to pay for the oil and the natural gas they're buying, as well, again, as other commodities. Billions, trillions, probably. I mean, I don't know how much oil and natural gas the world uses every day, every week, every month, but I know it's billions of barrels of oil. I don't know how many. I don't even know what the unit of measure is. Cubic liters or something like that for natural gas. But one thing that's important to understand in all of this is that currencies, there are a lot of people I know are still under the impression that money, Canadian dollar, American dollar, the euro, whatever, that these are backed by precious metal or that there's some underlying value to them. And in point of fact, and I'd invite you to research this, all the world's major currencies, in fact, I think it's pretty much every currency in the world, they're what are called fiat currencies. And basically what that means is there's no underlying intrinsic value to them. The value is more or less a belief system. People believe they have value, though, so they have value. And if you think about it, when you go to the grocery store, just as an example, and you load yourself up with $200, $300, $400 worth of groceries, and if you're paying in physical cash, it's basically a trust-based system that this paper here represents value. But underneath it, the gold standard ended sometime in I think it was sometime around 1914 that the U.S. got rid of the gold standard, and countries around the world, Canada, we completely eliminated our federal gold and silver, our precious metal reserves. They were completely eliminated sometime in I think it was the 1970s. I'm not 100% clear on every single, detail, minute point. But basically, broadly speaking, this I know to be true is that the world's currencies, Canadian dollar, American dollar, euro, these are fiat currencies. They're based on trust. And so what happens is in the marketplace, in a market like the stock market, the value of a company's shares are determined by two principal factors, supply and demand. If there's more people wanting to buy a stock than there are those willing to sell it, then the price rises. And that's true in any marketplace. When there are more buyers than there is available supply, the price of goods goes up. Conversely, when there's more supply than there is people willing to buy, prices decline. And dollars are, in a fashion, they are like a stock in the stock market. And because countries that are purchasing oil and natural gas, because they're transacting those deals in US dollars, they have to have huge reserves of US dollars on account. The US dollar is often referred to as the world's preferred reserve currency. Countries like to have large holdings of US dollars in their reserves so that they're able to go out into the marketplace because, again, most of the commodities in the world are transacted in US dollars. So what happens if Russia goes ahead and insists on payment in rubles instead of dollars? That will mean that countries purchasing Russian natural gas, and as I understand things, again, this is one of those areas I'm not 100% sure on all the finer, minute details, but broadly speaking, Russia is vital to Western, not just Eastern Europe, but Western Europe, because that's where a large part of their natural gas comes from. And so they've got huge stores of, huge bank accounts with US dollars in to pay for it. Now, if they have to pay in rubles, Putin, am I saying that right? Being Canadian, I always want to say Putin. Putin is saying that countries will have to open up accounts in Russian banks that are denominated in rubles. So what would that mean? That would mean divesting themselves of US dollars and rather buying rubles to fill up, to fill up their bank accounts. And that means demand for the US dollar, a fiat currency, drops significantly because Russia is one of the world's major suppliers of natural gas. If you go back to the Iraq War, and I'm talking the second Iraq War, 2005-2006, it was said that Iraq was going to start up its own oil bourse exchange, and that they were going to price their oil in euros and rubles, as I recall. But I know euros for sure, and I believe also in euro or in rubles. And now, does that mean the money trading? Hey, you can price something any way you want and then just factor in the exchange and continue to play with paying US dollars. I'm not certain if Iraq was going to require payment in euros or rubles, but I believe they were. And some have used that as a suggestion that, the war wasn't about, obviously the war in Iraq, most people believe that the invisible weapons of mass destruction were an excuse, that there were no weapons of mass destruction. The only thing they ever found in Iraq was some inert sarin gas, which had actually been supplied to the Iraqis by the Americans when Iraq was fighting a war against Iran. And so the weapons of mass destruction, a lot of people said, oh, that's just a red herring. That's just an excuse to go to war. People thought the real reason was to gain control of the Iraqi oil fields, was to make Halliburton, Vice President Dick Cheney, Vice President under George W. Bush, to make Halliburton, a company he had formerly been a senior executive with. I believe he may have even been the CEO, fill the pockets of their shareholders and make that company rich. Geopolitical, there are a whole bunch of reasons, and one of the reasons that was postulated by some was that because Iraq was going to start its own oil exchange, they call it a bourse, B-O-U-R-S-E, and that they were going to require payment for oil transacted on their exchange in rubles and euros rather than US dollars. And if all of a sudden countries started divesting themselves majorly of US dollars and instead started buying rubles, started buying euros, those currencies would climb in value and the US dollar would conceivably plummet. The same dynamics are in play here. It's being said that the European nations are pushing back and saying they're not going to comply. Then what's Putin going to do? Is he going to turn off the tap and not give, he's kind of got a captive market in Europe. And we're only just getting into April. Northern Europe still gets cold at this time of year. Natural gas, is used in hot water heaters. It's not just for heating, although the winter, if it's cold, it's a major source of heat. So that aside, the ramifications for the world economy, because right now the world economy of the United States is still the world's largest economy, and with China coming up fast. And if all of a sudden their dollar tanked, you have a chance for turmoil, upheaval. It would mean inflationary pressure for the United States, probably Canada as well, because that's where we buy. We import more from the United States, obviously, than any other country. And I can't read the name, but Beepin is asking, can the US dollar decline? Yes, the US dollar can decline. It goes up and it goes down. It goes up and it goes down. All world currencies trade. The US dollar has been typically one of the world's most stable currencies. And the reason for that is because it is the world's preferred reserve currency. Countries like to have US dollars in reserve, so that creates demand for the US dollar. The more demand there is for the US dollar, that helps the price. That's why the US can print so much money without it causing inflationary pressure or a devaluation of the dollar, because there's such a heightened level of demand. And as oil prices rise, we're up over $100 a barrel, although that's looking like it's going to take a downtick because Biden is opening up the taps on U.S. oil reserves. But up and around, the higher oil goes, well, the more U.S. dollars countries need to have on account to purchase the oil they're buying. If oil goes down, then they can ease off. And so, the U.S. dollar does fluctuate, but not as much. Canada's currency, by contrast, is far more volatile than the US dollar. So my concern is that I'm not 100% sold on the fact that Iraq was invaded over their decision or their move toward creating an oil bourse that would be transacting their oil in rubles and euros. I do think it's very possible. I actually think there are a number of reasons why the U.S. invaded Iraq, and I don't think any of them had anything to do with weapons of mass destruction. I think that was just a red herring to get buy-in, because I do genuinely think it was geopolitical, wanting to control a key piece of real estate. I do think they wanted to get control of Iraqi oil fields and reserves. I do think Russia has always been a big ally of Iran, so they wanted a counterbalance to that. So they wanted to ensure that they had the full backing, that they were fully in control of Iraq. Lots of reasons. I don't think there's ever just one singular reason for a war. But now we're seeing the Russian invasion of Ukraine, and with Zelensky making overtures to Western NATO nations, asking for air forces from NATO allied countries to enforce a no-fly zone. He's asking for military aid. He's asking for armaments. You know, he's openly campaigning for that. And the West has so far, NATO has so far pulled back. They don't want to get into a full-scale war with Russia. Um, but now, so we have that dynamic playing forth, and now we have an economic dynamic playing forth where Russia is saying, you're going to pay for your natural gas in the rubles, you're not going to pay in US dollars. And I can see potential for conflict. And I think at the end of the day, when it comes to military conflict, when it comes to war, that typically the reasons are economic. Everything else is just theater, but dollars and cents rule the day. So went on for 15 minutes. Those are my thoughts on it. Welcome your comments. If you like it, thumb. If you want to subscribe. If you want to share, you're welcome to share. So much going on in the world right now. War between Russia and Ukraine. Will NATO get involved? Now we have another potential reason. Of course, COVID hasn't gone away. The hot mess mom is saying that Putin is playing chess while the rest of the world is playing checkers. The amount of mass starvation will come from all of this. Yeah, I think we're already there. I think we're already witnessing mass starvation due to constraints in the global supply chains caused by COVID. We've hammered ourselves. You know, cure worse than the disease. You know, trying to mitigate the spread of a virus to the exclusion of pretty much everything else, and one of those things being world hunger. Just because it's not being reported on doesn't mean it's not happening. You know, 2022, scary times. Why am I? I'm doing okay. Not that anyone really cares, but if you do, I'm doing okay. And I am convinced that a major part of the reason why I'm doing okay is because of faith, something that's not very popular now. You know, belief in Jesus Christ as Lord and Savior is not a commonly held belief anymore. But it keeps me smiling because at the end of the day, I know who's in control and I know who wins the game. I have read to the end of the book. Sorry for evangelizing a little at the end. I try not to do it too much because I know how annoying it can be. I haven't always been on the Christian path. I only got back on when I was around the age of 40 after having walked away for a good 20 or so years. And I know how annoying it was when I was a non-believer. So I try to tread gently because that's how I ended coming back. It took a few gentle nudges. Maybe one day I'll share my testimony on here, but I'll label it as such so that as I know. So one thing it says in the Bible, it says we are not to know the date or the hour. Ours is not to know the time, but we can recognize the seasons in which we are living. And these are interesting seasons. But with that being said, I'm going to prattle on a little more. With that being said, I'm 55, I'm old. And I've been hearing about the end times since I was a teenager. The world is coming to an end. And Herbert W. Armstrong and the World Tomorrow used to have a TV show on, and we are in the end times. So 40 years later, and is it not? I don't know, but I do know Scripture, and there is supposed to be wars and rumors of war. Well, we have a war. We have a war between Ukraine and Russia, but we also have rumors of war because there is talk of conflict between Iraq and Israel, as well as Iraq's so-called proxies. Iraq is often, or rather, I'm confusing. I do this from time to time. I didn't mean Iraq. I meant Iran. Iran and Israel are being very belligerent toward each other. There's a lot of saber rattling going on. And Iran has what they call proxies, Hamas, Hezbollah. And so there's potential there. And obviously, the other big one is between the Chinese and the Taiwan, because as far as China is concerned, Taiwan is a breakaway state, almost like the southern U.S. during their Civil War. China has never recognized Taiwan as an autonomous country, ever. And they've always said that that's just, you know, they've always, like Hong Kong, they took Hong Kong back over, but Hong Kong was different because Hong Kong, the British had leased Hong Kong from mainland China. And then the lease expired and they had to give China back. So there was a legal thing there. With Taiwan, Taiwan broke away, declared its independence, but China has never recognized it. And China has always said that it's still part of China. So there's that potential. Those are the three big ones. Well, the one that's current, and then Iran, Israel, and China, Taiwan. And now we have economic upheaval. And I know that the three biggest drivers of human depopulation throughout all of human history, there are three things: disease, war, and famine. And the three go, they're like butter and salt on popcorn. You know, you have a war often leads to disease, war often leads to the destruction of farmlands, which in turn leads to famine. So lots happening in the world. Be well. Pick up a Bible. You'll find some peace in there. The Psalms are amazing. And God bless everyone. Good night.